Tonight, Kathy Holloway Hill continues her series on mental health.
We're looking at all types of relationship dynamics to see how it is that you may have learned some of the things, what may have been instilled.
Tonight on Living by Design. Living by Design with host Kathy Holloway Hill. Kathy is a strong, powerful voice. She entertains, informs, and inspires her audiences everywhere she goes.
Welcome to the Living by Design show. I am Kathy Holloway Hill, your host, and I am so excited to continue our Healthy by Design mental health awareness series. This has been such a powerful series, and we will continue it today with our incredible guest. Her name is Shar'ron Mason. And Shar'ron, first of all, welcome to Living by Design.
Thank you so much. I am so happy to be here.
And I am so glad you're here. And I am going to let you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your background and your credentials before we jump into our discussion.
So I am Shar'ron Mason. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I have my own private practice called Love That Relationship because I'm all about healthy relationships. So that's with yourself, that's with God, that's with friends, family, all about healthy relationships. And of course, I'm a mental, emotional, relational health professional. I did my schooling at Christian Theological Seminary, wonderful experience. And I love working with couples, families, individuals on their mental, emotional, relational health.
Oh my goodness, that is wonderful. And I love everything you said. And the first thing I want you to just please appeal to our viewers, the criticality of taking care of your mental and emotional health.
Yes. So it impacts every area of your life. It's going to impact you on your job. It's going to impact you in your household. It's going to, all relationships, any and everything we do stands or falls on our mental emotional health. So it's critical. I mean, you touched on that. It is critical. And sometimes we minimize it when it should definitely be a top priority, our mental emotional health.
That is so true. And I mean, we can see some of the things in ourselves, maybe we want to try to ignore it, but we have anger outbursts, we're sad, we're distressed, we have stress, we're depressed. We feel these things, but yet we ignore them. And I just really want us to try to have an open mind with this discussion today, because this is how we're going to start the process of healing. Yes. Now, we all know the last 2 years has just been everywhere. I don't care who you are. You cannot live on this planet and not be affected by the last couple of years. I mean, we see people going in, shooting up places and drive-by shootings and all kinds of ridiculous things. And I'm really sad to see all the suicide. The suicide rate has quadrupled over the last year or so. So let's just start off the discussion, Shar'ron, and talk a little bit about the family dynamic, because it affects everyone. When one person is mentally distressed or emotionally distressed, or their emotions are all out of control, they're just out of whack, it's going to trickle down. And my biggest concern are the children. I mean, I'm concerned about everyone, but the children, that trauma in childhood can really follow you into adulthood. So just talk about all of the family dynamic, the dad, the mom, and all the way down to the children.
So you hit on it. Absolutely. any person that's impacted within a family, everyone else is going to feel it in some way. Oftentimes what I find is everyone could possibly have their own emotional issues or their own mental health issues apart from one another. And then when you put that together within a household, now we have someone that may be experiencing anxiety, someone else depression, someone else may have PTSD. So there's so many things that can take place just within one household. And it can be that we had different experiences that brought these things on. It can be that we have chemical imbalances, or it could be that we had the same experience, but of course it was experienced in a different way. So we may have all have witnessed a family member lose their life, but that doesn't mean that we're all going to be impacted the same way. You have some people that now I may shut my emotions down. You have some people that mine may be more outwardly expressed. So it's so many things that can take place within the household, but it's important to assess each and every person as an individual rather than saying that this is what I'm going to apply to each and every person, because it doesn't work like that. We are individuals and things impact us differently. So rather than saying that, hey, this thing really didn't bother me, so everybody else must be okay, when in fact, oftentimes we are impacted, and it may be that we may not know how to address the things that we've experienced. So address it. First of all, be aware that whatever took place with me may not be the same thing with you. And then how are we going to go about making sure that each and every member of this household is in the best place that they can be mentally and emotionally, be willing to kind of go underneath the surface. Sometimes we want to sweep things under the rug, but what we really need to do is to get up under that rug and bring those things out, because as you stated before, we don't address these things now, they're going to continue to impact us later. They're going to manifest in some way, and it's probably not going to, of course, be a good way that it's going to come out. So it's best to address it as early as possible in order to have the best outcome. I'm all about a great quality of life, but how can I have a great quality of life when I have all these things that are continuing to impact me? And so you look at the racial things we experience, you look at the corona, COVID, we look at
the economy,
grief and loss in so many ways. A lot of the people that I work with, I find that there's grief, loss in there throughout. So the conversation may be initially I came in about this thing to do with a relationship, but oftentimes we're going to have some conversation about grief and loss.
Yes. You mentioned PTSD. So let me stop there for a second, because I want you to talk a little bit about PTSD, because I think whenever people hear that, because I know this is what comes to me whenever I speak to someone about that, they always think that's just from servicemen, people who have served in the armed forces. They come back from war, so they have PTSD. That's not true.
No.
Yeah, anyone can have post-trauma. I would think a lot of people have trauma as a result of the last couple of years.
Oh, goodness, yes. So we've got things that we experienced that we never should have had to go through. And then this thing impacts me. It impacts different people differently. And so something that may have been traumatic to one person may not be traumatic to the next person. But each and every one of us could experience trauma, and we could have post-traumatic stress disorder. We can have the symptoms of, we could be hypervigilant, so many pieces that go into it, but it's absolutely not just about servicemen and servicewomen.
Yes, absolutely. And, there are piece parts, because we're talking about the family dynamic. So there are piece parts because everyone is an individual first. Mm-hmm. And then you expand and you spread that out. And it's not just COVID that can run rampant throughout the household. It's also emotional and mental distress. But before we get into that, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be right back with more. Welcome back. We are here with Ms. Shar'ron Mason, and I am loving this conversation. So let's just pick right up where we left off. So let me ask a question about the entire family dynamic, because we talked a little bit about post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, but it's not just for people who have been to war and came back from that. Trauma is trauma. And when we talk about trauma, Shar'ron, let's just maybe talk about how you handle it in your practice. Do you first try to go back to childhood to find out if there was any trauma? Because trauma comes in a lot of different ways.
Oh, absolutely.
A lot of different manners. So do you typically try to go back with your patients to see if there was trauma in their childhood?
Yeah, so when I'm doing the assessment, I'm looking at some of those things. Of course, going back, having the conversation about your upbringing, things that you experienced, what was taking place within the household. Also realizing that with that assessment, some people are going to be able to share more in depth than others. So oftentimes it's later on within sessions that you come to the place where you can have this conversation about this thing that really is personal, really is intimate, where I have to be vulnerable. So it really depends on the person that I'm working with. But at some point, we're going to touch on those things. Of course, if a person stays around long enough, everybody doesn't stick around, for some of the deeper things. So we're going to have the conversations about relationships and then how certain patterns may have developed. Oftentimes we can have those conversations about what you saw when you were coming up. How did you see, your parents interact, or mom and her boyfriend? How did you even see your parents interact with their parents? So we're looking at all types of relationship dynamics to see how it is that you may have learned some of the things, what may have been instilled. What have you seen? What have you heard? What have you experienced? Because we can't unsee anything. We can't unhear it. We can't unexperience it. And we're going to be impacted by all of those things. So just to find, what makes up this entire person. It's a lifetime of experiences. And hopefully, a person is willing to share, be vulnerable, because some things are absolutely personal, and really being mindful that in having the conversation, if it's not had in the right way, then it can be re-traumatizing. So we don't want to do that. We want to be very careful, realizing that this is a person's life, and just engage in the conversation in the healthiest way possible for this person.
And that's why we have individuals like you, Shar'ron, because a lot of this stuff is so deeply embedded in your subconscious, and people may not even be aware that their behaviors are a result of something that happened 20 years ago. They may not know why they're acting out. They may not know, why can't I get along with anybody? Why do people keep dropping out of my life because I have no filter on my mouth? Or, these are all things that people just kind of ignore, but we don't ignore going to our primary care doctor.
Right.
If something is hurting you physically, you don't ignore that.
Some people do. That's the unfortunate part, that some people do. And so what we're trying to do is to break the stigma, because there's not really a stigma around going to see your primary care physician. Go see him. Oh, no big deal. No one's going to look at you a certain way. But there tends to still be a stigma around mental health, mental illness. And we're trying to break that and make it more, normalize it. So absolutely, I'm tending to my mental health. Absolutely, I'm tending to my emotional, my relational. I'm tending to my health. And rather than just continuing to separate it, let's look at all this, because we're one whole person with all these aspects of ourselves. So let's address it all and take away the stigma.
Yeah, I think, and it's just my thought, the term mental illness does not set well with people. Right. And it's really not mental illness. It's whatever you're feeling emotionally. It's whatever thoughts you have, whatever. A lot of people have racing thoughts. If you have insomnia and you can't sleep at night because something's on your mind, all of that, it all counts. So
it's on a spectrum.
Exactly. I mean, depression, anxiety, there's all kinds of things that, don't have to go deep into the illnesses like schizophrenia and bipolar. You don't have to even go into all those, but if you have some anger issues, or if you're sad, unnecessarily and you don't really, know why, are all the people who have passed from COVID. Just the grief alone. Grief is an emotional concern.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as you're touching on that, like you said, sometimes it's not about having to address some of the things, because if you're not experiencing it, then okay, let's take that off the table and not address it. But let's look at what it is that you are presenting with, what it is that's making it difficult for you to sleep, what's impacting, your eating habits. So, I mean, some of that is the basic things. And I'm finding that a lot of people are struggling with getting proper rest. And if I'm not able to get to sleep, fall asleep, stay asleep, have proper rest, it's going to impact me through the entire remainder of my day. And for some people, it's like, no, I operate off of 4 hours. It's like, for how long do you expect to be able to continue to do that? Or like you said, I've got racing thoughts. I have so much that's going in my mind and I can't shut it off. And so it's finding different things to be able to do to be able to control that better. For some people, it may be that I'm going to experience this. Some people, it's for a lifetime that they may experience things, but how can we decrease those symptoms as much as possible so that you can have a better quality of life? And for some people, it's no, I'm going to totally alleviate those symptoms. But for some, it's about, okay, how can we decrease it as much as possible?
And just you being in this field, can you help people understand that your body heals when you sleep? So if you don't sleep, guess what?
Yeah, you're going to be in trouble in the long run. And so I look at the youth, and for some young people, they say, well, I don't need a lot of hours of sleep. Well, once you get, up to this age, you're going to be like, oh, I am needing my rest. I am needing my sleep. And like you said, I needed to be able to heal. I needed to be able to think and be able to process. It impacts everything across the board. And sometimes we just minimize it when in fact, we need to be mindful. Okay, am I getting proper rest? Am I setting myself up for success by getting proper rest, proper nutrition, proper exercise, tending to all those things?
This is so true. And that is just, an entire round robin, for lack of a better term. It's just the full spectrum of your health.
Yes.
Health is, like you said when you first introduced yourself, it's mental, emotional, physical, spiritual.
Yes.
There's a lot to our health, and it's not just what your body is doing; it's what your mind is doing also. We're going to take another quick break, and we're going to be right back with more. So stay tuned. Welcome back. We are still here with our Healthy by Design series for mental and emotional health. And Shar'ron, let me just ask you to talk about everyone in the household and what they individually can do for themselves to try to everyone come together to make it a functional environment, more so than a dysfunctional environment, which is very easy to fall into.
So it is very important that we learn to extend grace to ourselves, extend grace to ourselves.
I like that.
For some people, it's what is that? They think about it in terms of, God, grace. No, we can extend grace to ourselves, which for me, it just means I'm allowed to be human. I don't believe in the shame thing. That's not helpful. Now, guilt can be a helpful thing, but shame is so not helpful. So how can I learn to extend grace to myself and then to extend grace to each and every person within this household? That does not mean that we don't hold ourselves and one another accountable, but we learn to love and to shower each other with something that is needed. The world doesn't tend to give us that, but we can within this household. And so, wow, thinking about the 3 A's as well. How can we continue to give each other affirmation, affection? How is it that we can give each other attention? And so the 3 A's is extremely important. Everyone needs attention, affection, and affirmation. That's a basic thing. But when we find that we're not able to get it, sometimes we start shutting that thing down and say that I don't need it, whereas everybody. And it's not just, of course, in your romantic relationships. We need it from our family as well. And so, oh goodness, what in the world is this thing about? Sometimes we have to learn because we may not have picked this up in our family's origin. Might not have got it from our mom, might not have got it from our dad. But how is it that we can bring this into our household so everyone's needs can be met? Extremely important. I can't treat each and every person the same way because chances are someone's going to be neglected in some way because they didn't need as much of that. They needed this, whereas they didn't get it because that wasn't what was given to someone else. So being individual in the way in which we approach one another and saying, what is it that, is my son's need? What does he need? What does my daughter need? Looking at myself, what is that I need? I need to make sure I do that assessment because if I don't, oftentimes I'm going to miss something. So kind of, hey, what's going on? What's going well? What did you enjoy within our interactions this week? What didn't work for you? So if I can be honest without repercussion, then I'm probably going to tell you a little bit more, tell you what it is that you need to know. So being able to set up a safe space that we can have honest conversations, because within this household, if we can't, then it's going to be really difficult to meet one another's needs because I'm going to hold back.
And it's also going to be difficult for you outside of the household. So what advice would you give teachers? Because they're in a very, very critical spot with an opportunity to jump in there and help just in case the parents are a little dysfunctional and they're not doing the greatest job at home. What can teachers do?
Okay, so I'm going to start with the piece of making sure that you're taking care of your own self-care across the board so that when I am working with my students, that I'm not pouring from an empty cup. I mean, just as students and everyone within the household is experiencing the effects of, the COVID, so are teachers, and oftentimes we may put them on a pedestal as if they're not impacted. So take care of your own mental and emotional health so that you come and your cup is as full as it can possibly be. Then I need to look at my students as individuals and not say that, oh, I've heard this story before, so it must be this. No, I've got to be listening, not just for a response, but listening for understanding. And once again, I'm still going to be able to extend some grace. I'm going to balance that thing out because, of course, I have to do what I need to do as a teacher, but I can extend some grace here as well and look at what are some things that I can do in my role that may help to fill some of the voids that the student may be missing. So I'm not necessarily crossing those boundaries, but I can absolutely be relational and not be distant in a way to where they're still not getting the interaction and the connection that they may need. And so look at the student as an individual. That's extremely important, and realize that we're all going through it. And some things aren't necessarily just about behavioral things. It may be that this child just has a need that isn't being met. I can check in on basic stuff. Did you have breakfast this morning? If you didn't, and the expectation is I'm going to be able to concentrate, that's not a realistic expectation. So sometimes we can meet some of those basic needs and then we can go from there.
I really like that a lot because I agree. Transformation does begin with you, and to assess your mental health, it begins with you. Everything begins with you before you can extend out to anyone else. So when we talk about resources, because a lot of people are reluctant to call a Shar'ron Mason, maybe they can talk to their pastor or, some other resources. What are some of the other things they could do or people they could talk to if they don't trust a therapist?
Let's say that I truly do need some mental, emotional health help. Reaching out to the friend may not be the thing that's going to do it. So sometimes I may need to push myself outside of my comfort zone and just to make that call so that I can get what I'm needing. Now, if I'm just needing someone to be able to vent to, or let's say that I am needing someone to help me even with the spiritual aspects of the things that I'm experiencing, absolutely, I talk to my pastor. So I really kind of need to be able to assess what it is that I'm needing so that I can know what's going to be the wise decision as far as who I reach out to. Now there's much more going on online as well. So I can find some great resources online, but it's being able to kind of check in.
It's not social media either.
Oh gosh, no. No, it's like it's almost replacing us, but it's like, oh goodness, you just kind of put something out there and you're hoping somebody's going to be able to help you with this thing that actually needs some professional to get in there with you and walk alongside you. And so being wise about where it is that you seek that help at.
I really like that. So I'm going to, before we run out of time, I want you to just give some of your information if someone wanted to reach out to you. And I know you mentioned before the show that you are not accepting new patients because you're just too filled up. You said you're going to start in January.
I said it'll probably be after the first of the year.
Okay, after the first of the year. So what are your contact information?
So I'm going to give my site. So it's lovethatrelationship.com, lovethatrelationship.com. And then my email is lovethatrelationship@gmail.com.
Oh, I love that. That's exactly what we all need to start doing, is loving our relationship. Shar'ron Mason, thank you so much for joining us for this episode. You have just been a wealth of knowledge, and I really appreciate it. I know our viewers do too. And I want to thank you also for joining in and just listen to everything and take it in and take the advice, because we want a healthy community. We'll see you next time, same time on the Living by Design show. Good night, everyone.